something amazing is that there's two books, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and this young man has a very unique origin story. Just to give you the synopsis before we start looking at it in the scriptures, he had a mom named Hannah. And Hannah was unable to have kids. And she prayed to God for a boy. And God answered her prayer. And she gave him to the Lord. And Samuel did amazing things with his life. Amazing things came out of his life, his ministry, his purpose. But it was because a mom was bold enough to come to God with a request for a son. And God honored that. And God blessed that. And we're so thankful today for mothers. God knew what he was doing when he created women. He extracted this extravagance out of the side of man. He took one and made two. He didn't take them out of the feet of man for man to step on or the head of man to be lorded over by, but the side to be together, to be one that would come alongside of. And how beautiful, like the video said, how beautiful this world is because of women. Ladies, we need you. We do. Not just to help us match our clothes or to buy groceries or raise the kids. There was a God origin, a God design, taking the one man, Adam, and taking out to create two. And so you have great value in our lives. Our kids need you. Even if our kids or your kids are grown and they're out of the house, they still need you. In fact, they may need you even more. Right? This weekend, next weekend. Graduations, right? All kinds of graduations happening. Kids flying the coop. But that doesn't mean that your job is over as a mom, right? For some, it's just started. Because we need our moms. And moms, your kids still need you. And so what we're talking about today is being a voice in your kids' lives and how to do that and overcome successfully the odds. Because the odds are against you in the sense of how the world is set up when your kids are out of the house and now they're able to be corrupted. They're able to be influenced by everything that's around them. And sometimes it becomes a hopeless situation for parents when they see their kids go off and do things contrary to the way that they were raised. And it causes us to become disheartened. And it discourages us from being a voice in their lives. But moms, you have a voice. Even if sometimes you've been shut out, it's only temporary. And your prayers always override any amount of distance. Your prayers as a mother override any amount of distance between you and your kids, any degree of obstinance. They're even capable of overcoming any kind of rejection. The power of a praying mother. God hears you. God hears the praying mother. We see that with Hannah. And if you have God's ear, you don't need anybody else. You have all that you need to do all that you need, wherever you need, whenever you need, because you have his ear. God's able. And you have heard and seen and witnessed testimony after testimony of God's faithfulness. And so we're going to learn some lessons today from Hannah in 1 Samuel chapter 1. Our story begins here in verse 9. And I'm going to read to you out of the ESV, which, if you don't have a Bible, don't always remember to do this, but we do have Bibles. So ushers, if you would stand real quick and scan your section. If you don't have a Bible, would you raise your hand, and then our ushers can get you one? Anybody? They'd love to put one in your hands. We got a few here. Good. So I'm going to read out of this with the first passage today. And then if you don't have a Bible, would you do me a favor and just keep this, please? We'd like to be able to sow that into your life. So 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 9, it says, So Hannah rose up after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Sorry, I started reading out of my Bible. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, Lord, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me, and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. So she said, if you will give me a son, I will give him to you all the days of his life. That's what she spoke. If you give me a son, I will give him to you all the days of his life. And we know, looking at the life of Samuel, that he was God's all the days of his life. How did that happen? It was through a decree from his mother's words, from her mouth, making this decree. If you give me a son, I will give him to you all the days of his life. That was the exchange. Verse 12, as she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Now Eli was the priest of the temple, and Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, no, my Lord. I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. And I know that if I asked for a raise of hands, I would certainly see most every hand go up, asking if you as a mom have poured out your soul before God about your kids. This is what Hannah's done, similar to what you've done. And in verse 20, we see that God answered. And in due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked from him of the Lord. When Hannah prayed for a son, she prayed to the same God that you pray to, and he answered. And he's still answering today. Amen? Amen. Hold your place in 1 Samuel and go to 1 John if you would. So just keep a thumb there in 1 Samuel because we're going to return back to it in just a moment. But turn to 1 John. If you go all the way to the end of the Bible to Revelations and just flip back a few books, you'll get to 1 John. We're going to look at chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5, starting in verse 14. When we look at the Bible, we can have confidence knowing that what we read, what we see, is speaking to us, and it's God's will for our situation, and we can have confidence knowing that we can have the outcome that we're asking him for. In 1 John chapter 5, verse 14, it says, "And this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatsoever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we desired of him." So when we make these requests, like Hannah did for a son, we know that we have the answer. Remember back in verse 20, it says, "And in due season, Hannah conceived." Now, sometimes things happen in a quick manner. But not everything happens on your timeline. Right? Not everything happens on my timeline. In fact, the best thing I can do, the best thing that you can do, is to not create a timeline and just get ourselves on his timeline. There's a verse in, I believe it's in Hebrews, it says that the promises of God are obtained through faith and patience. Patience. And patience isn't just waiting around, tapping your toes, looking at your watch. Patience is a confident expectation. It's a knowing. It's a knowing. Hannah exercised patience. And when she conceived, she knew that in 9 months, I'm going to have a manifestation, right? I'm going to have this baby in my arms. Hallelujah. So back to 1 Samuel chapter 1. So God is still answering today. We know that Hannah conceived. We know that she birthed this beautiful boy, Samuel. And in verse 24, which I'll read out of the Good News Bible, verse 24, it says, "After she weaned him, she took him to Shiloh, taking along a 3-year-old bull, a bushel of flour, and a leather bag full of wine. She took Samuel, young as he was, to the house of the Lord at Shiloh." So she weaned him and then brought him to the temple because she was fulfilling her vow. "Lord, if you give me a son, I'll give him to you, and he'll serve you all the days of his life." So she had weaned him and now was bringing him to the temple. Now, I did some research and I wasn't able to find conclusive evidence as to what age Samuel was when he was brought to the temple. Saw some reports as young as 22 months and some up to 6 years. So most records were saying 3 to 5 years. So we'll just take the difference. We'll say 4 years old. Okay? So he is 4 years old, let's say. Not trying to build a doctrine out of this. Okay? But picture her taking this weaned 4-year-old to the temple. She's fulfilling her promise to God. Verse 25, after they had killed the bull, she took the child to Eli. Hannah said, "Excuse me, sir, do you remember me? I'm the woman you saw standing here praying to the Lord. I asked him for this child, and he gave me what I asked for." She could have said, "You remember me? I was the woman that you thought was drunk, but I wasn't. I was praying, and this is what I got. God answered my prayer. God answered my prayer. I asked him for this child, and he gave me what I asked for." Verse 28, "So I am dedicating him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he will belong to the Lord." Then they worship the Lord there. So again, she makes that declaration. I'm giving him to the Lord. I'm dedicating him to the Lord. And as long as he lives, he will serve the Lord. And we don't know the full life of Samuel. And this isn't to say that Samuel never made a mistake, right? But it didn't matter. Any report that got back to Hannah about Samuel, her declaration is, he is given to the Lord and he will serve the Lord all the days of his life. And we can look at it this way. Hannah raised him till he was 4. She invested in him. She did naturally what she could do to raise him and to then wean him. So she did the natural, and then she gave him to God to do the supernatural in his life. She gave him to the Lord. She invested what she could in the natural for those 4 years, and then she gave him to the Lord. Many parents are looking at their kids that are 18 now, graduating, knowing they did what they could do. Not that they did everything perfect, right? Moms and dads, we all recognize that we don't do everything perfect. We make mistakes. But we did the best we could. We did really good in areas. Some areas we didn't do so hot in, but we did what we could do in the natural to raise our kids. And now as they're leaving the home, we need to be giving them to the Lord. In fact, I would say that even now, it doesn't matter what age your kid is. In fact, we use this verse here on our baby dedication Sundays when we dedicate the babies. So from infancy to whatever age, you have the ability to make that decision to dedicate them to the Lord. That's what's supernatural about this story, is that Hannah made the decision for Samuel before Samuel had the decision to make. Hannah, again, with her words said, he is given to the Lord and he will serve the Lord all the days of his life. And I know I serve, and I know you serve the same God today. And I know that you can, with confidence, make those same declarations over your kids. Hannah had that ability. You're in a covenant now with God because of Jesus that's a greater covenant than she had with God. By all means, you can make those same declarations, giving your kids to the Lord. You did what you could do in the natural. Now it's time to give them to God and say all the days of their life they will serve the Lord. And it doesn't matter what report comes back contrary to that. God is faithful. And I am standing on his word. And my children will serve God all the days of their life. And some might say, well, you don't know where my kids are at. You don't know the environment that they're in right now. You don't understand, Pastor, what they're being influenced by. But if you look at the environment that Samuel was put in at 4 years old at the temple, it wasn't the greatest either. But Hannah wasn't giving Samuel to Eli. She was giving him to the Lord. She was putting him safely in the hands of the Lord to take care of. That's exactly where we need to be placing our kids, regardless if they're in the house, out of the house, or somewhere in between. When Hannah gave her son to the Lord, she was fulfilling her vow that she made to God. God was faithful to watch over her son Samuel and make him one of the greatest prophets that Israel had ever known. And that same God is faithful today to watch over your sons and your daughters and draw out of them the greatness that is in them. He is. He is faithful. We are our biggest cheerleaders for our kids. I saw this. I know this is probably more fitting for Father's Day, but I know it can also apply to moms. That it was actually written to sons, and it says, and I'll just say this to my son, I'm the only man in your life, aside from God, that will want you to outdo me, that'll rejoice when you do greater than I did. Because I want what's best. And I want my son to do greater than I've done. Right? Moms feel the same way. Moms want their kids to far surpass them. They don't want their kids to just hit this invisible ceiling and don't do any better. We want greater for our kids, and we know. We spot greatness in our kids even at a young age, right? You see things in your kids that others don't see. And God is able to draw those things out. And so we need to give them to God. Sometimes that means us removing ourselves a little bit. Sometimes the harder we work to get our kids in line, the more it messes things up. For other people, nobody in here has ever experienced that, but I've heard reports from other churches that there are these people that sometimes say too much or interfere too much or try to hold on to the reins too tightly, and then it ends up causing schism. It causes things to go in the wrong direction. And you got to get this picture, folks, that Hannah simply made a request to the Lord and said, God, if you will give me a son, I will give him to you, and he will serve you all the days of your life. And when God moved and did what he did, she moved and did what she did. And Samuel was one of the greatest prophets that Israel ever known, because God then was able to draw out of Samuel the greatness that was in him, not Eli. Eli was a train wreck. Eli was not a good dad to his sons. When you read about Eli, Eli was part of this generation of priests. Eli was part of that tribe where he was just naturally in line to be the priest to watch over the temple, and then his sons would be the next in line, and then the grandsons would be the next in line. That's how it worked. But because of Eli's kids, those two boys and how they acted, God took that line, that lineage from him and gave it to Samuel. So Eli was a poor parent. He's not a good dad. He didn't raise his kids right. Eli also, when he saw Hannah praying, he thought she was drunk. He was not even spiritual enough to recognize that she was praying from her heart and what was actually going on there. He was insensitive to the Spirit of God. And when you read in chapter 2, there were 3 times that Samuel was woken up by the Lord, and he thought it was Eli calling him, and he went into Eli's bedroom all 3 times, assuming it was Eli, and Eli said, it's not me, it's not me. And then finally Eli realized that, oh, it's God talking to you. Then gave him the proper instruction. Again, Eli was dense spiritually. He was not raising his boys correctly. He didn't create the correct environment for his kids to be raised in. And that was where Samuel was going to live. So she could have been a nervous wreck, saying, I made this promise to God. I'm going to give him to the Lord, and I'm going to hand him over to Eli, and he's going to be raised here in the temple. But look at what's going on in the temple. How do I know that my son's going to turn out right when I look at Eli's kids? But she didn't give her son to Eli. She gave her son to the Lord. And the Lord's not going to mess up. That's the point. You have to give them to God. It doesn't matter the situation that they're in now or the influences that they have right now. Despite being left with Eli, he was still in the care of the Lord. And we can find all kinds of obstacles as to what's speaking into our kids' life. Maybe it's their spouse, maybe it's a girlfriend or boyfriend, maybe it's the world that they've allowed into their life. Whatever influence, it doesn't matter, because you're not giving your kids to them, you're giving your child to the Lord. And when you make that decree as a parent, then it's game over, because you're giving them to God. And I can personally testify to this. My oldest, it looked like that for a number of years that this was hopeless, that she was going down the wrong road, and then it would even go down another wrong road, and then another wrong road. And then right when it seemed like she was surfacing and starting to do better, then something would come up and take her down another wrong road. And I can tell you from experience, I've tried to step in and grab the reins and steer the ship and get it back into the right lane, and it only made things worse. And it wasn't until I actually had to distance myself from the situation, not from her, but I just had to say, God, this is yours. I can't fix this. I have to give this to God. And did I do it perfectly? No. I did, yes, make the commitment to give it to God. Were there times I was tempted to go back and try to grab the wheel or to get into fear? Yes. But I made the decision, nope, she is going to be yours, God. I'm giving her to you, and she will serve you all the days of your life. And I know my wife had a big part in that. So it wasn't just me. My wife prayed. We made those commitments. We made those declarations. And she's one of the two that are graduating this coming Friday. Graduating from Bible college. She's going to go a third year. She's getting married in September to a pastor's son. He's going to do ministry. And I couldn't be happier. Not that ministry is the pinnacle of a calling. Like, there's callings, like some people are plumbers and some people are dentists, but man, if you could ever be called to ministry, that's like, no. That's not what I'm implying at all. At all. Because there's not one person that has greater value because of their occupation in the kingdom of God. In the world system, sure. We place greater value in the world, that's how it's set up, based on your occupation, right? Based on the income, based on your level of intelligence, we'll place greater value, but that's not how it works in the kingdom. And it doesn't work that way in the kingdom when it comes to moms and dads. God doesn't place different value on moms than he does on dads. God doesn't snub his nose at a stay-at-home mom. God doesn't put a different level of value and say that, well, women are equipped to do this and men are equipped to do that. It's not how it works in the kingdom. In fact, there's a verse that actually states that in the kingdom of God, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, there's neither male nor female, right? We are sons and daughters in the kingdom, and we have equal value. Equal value. Just want to close with this. It doesn't matter where your kids are now and who you perceive to have the influence in their lives. You have the ability today to give them to God. To give them to God. And you have that ability as a mom. You have that ability as a dad. To give them to God. The natural What's going on right now in their lives is always subject to change. The natural is always temporary, here today and gone tomorrow. But with God on your side, you then realize it's only a matter of time before you experience the manifest power of God working in your life. It's only a matter of time. I'd like to say that my daughter just was perfect for the last 24 years. And in my eyes, she's pretty perfect, right? Despite some of the shortcomings. But there were times where I wanted to give up. And like I shared, there are times when I did give up. But I had to come back to the faithfulness of God and His Word. And realize that as a dad, as a mom, I can make that commitment, placing my kids in God's hands, and I can see Him do what I'm asking. Moms, I know that you take things a lot more personally than us dads do. That's not a flaw. That's how you're built. I know that when we look at our kids and the choices that they make, dads look at it from a different perspective than moms. I know that there's many moms that live with heaping amounts of regret, looking at their the home environment and how they raised their kids and seeing all the areas that they missed it. And it runs like a bad movie over and over. And I want that to stop today.